you. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm, and today I've got about 8 books to talk to you about. It's the last 2 weeks' worth of Friday reads. I didn't do one last week because it was Passover, and my mum has come to stay with us, and she said, "Why haven't you done a video?" So I tuned on Friday morning. Yeah, Mum, because you were in the living room and I didn't have this private space to do it. Sorry, but here's one for you. I'm doing it at work, so you can watch this. Sorry, Mum. But they just announced the program for this year's Jerusalem International Writers Festival, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, the middle of May. So I booked tickets for a couple of events, and hopefully I'll take you along. There's something happening on the last night, but they haven't announced what it is yet. So I haven't booked for that yet, but it's supposed to be a celebration of 10 years of the festival. But the 2 I have booked for are an evening with Olga Tokarczuk, the Nobel laureate. I read her Flights. I haven't read the Book of Jacob. I'm not sure whether I will, because it's a big commitment, but I've got that lovely Fitzgerald tradition. I never read the Drive Your Bones Over the Plough Over the Bones of the Dead. That was it. But I'm looking forward to meeting her and maybe getting to sign my copy of Flights. And then I've also booked another night to meet Joshua Cohen, who is the author of, I read Moving Kings, which was also Fitzgerald, and his new book is The Netanyahu's, which I haven't read yet, but I know some people, I think Bob the Booker just read. And maybe I'll pick that up at the festival if they've got a copy of it. And he read the Book of Numbers a few years ago, which I read. Anyway, he's talking, and I'll be there that night and hopefully get him to sign my copy of Moving Kings as well. And then there are a couple of online events. So there's one with Julian Barnes, and another interview with Jonathan Franzen. So maybe I'll tune in or watch those on catch up afterwards. So that's coming up, and as I say, hopefully I'll bring my phone with me and take some video. And if any of you have any questions that you would like me to ask Nobel laureate Olga Tokarczuk, by all means stick them in the comments. And if I get up the courage, I will ask her on behalf of BookTube everything you've wanted to know. Okay, this is where I am with reading. When last we met about 2 weeks ago, I had just started Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. I loved this. Loved it. I went back, I'm late in the game and a lot of people read it. I went back and watched some of the past reviews that people did. Mark Nash did a review where he thought the book was terrific, but he didn't think much of the writing. Brian was a little warmer on the actual writing and really enjoyed the book. I loved the writing. I thought it was whip smart. I thought it was very generous. I thought this was an insider look at the trans community that was never condescending, was never didactic. It was open and generous. I think as an insider look, it also has that privilege of being cynical, because you can look at something from all angles and talk about what is fabulous about this world that you live in, and also what is less fabulous about it. And I think Peters does a terrific job. Maybe 50 pages too long, but with the writing this smart, this funny, this affecting, and this illuminating, I was okay with it. There's a little chapter that I want to read, which really I didn't bring my glass with me, so I'm going to hold the book here and just read these 2 paragraphs from further on in the book. So those of you who don't know what Detransition Baby is about, it's about a triangle of sorts with 3 main characters. Reese, who is a trans woman. There is Ames, who is a formerly trans woman who has detransitioned back, and it's now Ames, who since detransitioning back into a man, has impregnated his co-worker, Katrina. And between the 3 of them, they're trying to work out whether they're going to and how they're going to parent this not even born yet baby. So we're starting with complicated, involved lives, a world that the notion of detransitioning and the political meaning of detransitioning, that was something I've never even thought of or considered before or understood what that was. And so much of things which were completely new to me are generously offered, turned around, and shown to you without a judgment, with a clear sort of understanding. Just everything about this was terrific and also deeply funny. This is one of the chapters, I say, about 2/3 of the way into the book, chapter 7. This is 8 weeks after conception. So we go back and forth in time. There are chapters that are after we find out Katrina's pregnant, and then we go back to when Ames was Amy and was a trans woman in a relationship with Reese, the other trans woman. And this is, I think, mostly from Reese's point of view. If you're a trans girl who knows many other trans girls, you go to church a lot, because church is where they hold the funerals. What no one wants to admit about funerals, because you're supposed to be crushed by the melancholy of being a trans girl among the prematurely dead trans girls, is that funerals for dead trans girls number among the notable social events of a season. Who knows what people will say at a trans funeral? Will some queer make a political street speech instead of a eulogy, so that for weeks afterward, other queers will post outraged screeds about it on social media? How many times will a family member dead name or misgender the deceased from the pulpit, unabashed about it in his grief, peering out at this sea of weirdos that showed up unexpectedly to what he considered a family event? Did their son, daughter, really have all these friends? Which nice white cis person will remind the assembled mourners, a high percentage of whom are trans women themselves, that everyone must do more to save trans women of colour who are being murdered, although this particular highly attended funeral is, of course, a suicide, because that's how the white girls die prematurely. Bitter, funny, open-eyed. This book was a joy because it's funny, and I'm not throwing around the word important because what the hell do I know? But just a great read, and highly recommended. Detransition Baby, Tori Peters. Love this. Really excited to see what Tori Peters does next. After that, I read Hellboy. This is volume 7 in the collected trade paperbacks. This was The Troll Witch and others. Coincidentally or not, today or yesterday, both this week, both Steve Donoghue and Michael Vaughan did their weekly look at comic books, talking about Hellboy, talking about the first of the trades, which was Seed of Destruction. I've been working my way through these. I say this is volume 7, a little bit of diminishing returns, although Mignola's artwork is still fabulous. And I've got a few more of them I've already collected, and when I get through those, I'll decide if I want, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 left at the end that I haven't got to. And then there's the whole BPRD, Bureau of Paranormal Research and something, which I think sometimes the art is by Mignola, but he doesn't write them all, but it's some of the characters, and I may explore that afterwards. But I've really enjoyed my time with Hellboy, and I say I've got a few more of these. But if you want to know more about the history of Hellboy and get a deeper appreciation of who the character is, watch Steve Donoghue and Michael Vaughan, because they've done a really good deep dive. After that, slipped back into millennial fiction, another one that was super popular last year, and I picked it up thinking, that sounds interesting. Fake Accounts by Lauren Euler, and I picked this up on eBay, so it's a hardback that I didn't pay anywhere near for, but a UK hardback I didn't pay anywhere near for, but yeah, I did not love this at all, and partly because I think I was sold a false bill of goods. So the thing that we're told, or the thing I knew about the book going in, is that the narrator is in a relationship with a bloke, and she finds out that he is an online troll. She looks at his phone, right? So the chain of evidence is corrupt to begin with. When he's having a shower or something, she looks at his phone and finds out that he is a conspiracy theorist and is involved. He runs his own Instagram page full of nutty conspiracy theories and got tens of thousands of followers, and it's all just astonishingly weird and inappropriate and fascistic and unpleasant, and she decides that what she's going to do. She's working out whether she needs to break up with him, and then plot happens. So I thought that the whole thing was going in one direction. It was going to be about dealing, with people whose opinions you don't really know, and this online life versus real life, and how we negotiate the two, and what happens when the two seem to be in conflict, or not, at least not in sync. And in fact, it ends up being all about the narrator. So that whole plot point that I thought the book was going to be entirely about is shunted aside very early on, and the fake account is not necessarily the boyfriend's account, but our narrator, who is an inveterate liar, and reinvents herself at every single opportunity and tells a different story to every person she meets. And then it's a lot about online dating, and spends a lot of time in Berlin. She met the boyfriend originally in Berlin, but they've been living in the States, and she moves back to Berlin, and lies about everything to everyone. I think it was a bit tedious, so I didn't really enjoy it very much. I don't think it had anything particularly interesting to say about online dating or online personas and why we hide who we really are. It was all a bit, not my, whatever, fake accounts by Lauren Euler, disappointing. Other graphic novel after that, I read this, Lois Lane, Enemy of the People. This was a 12-issue maxi series. I'm calling it maxi series. I don't know if they still call it maxi series. So this would have been 12 individual comic book issues, each going for, I think, average comic book is about $3.99 these days. And this is the collection of all 12, written by Greg Rucka, who I've read other comic work that he's done. And he's a pretty reliable writer, and I chased this down. I decided to pick this up because of Greg Rucka. I like the character of Lois Lane. I like the idea the idea that the central idea to this is that Lois Lane, in case you don't know, Lois Lane is Superman's girlfriend, and Clark Kent's wife by this continuity. And works for Daily Planet and blah blah blah, Metropolis, etc. The backing for this story is that she's also one of the world's greatest investigative journalists, and so I went into this thinking this was going to be sort of Watergate level scandal uncovering corruption, and be in Lois's world without Superman. So it was going to be sort of street level with characters in the DC world and characters we love, and maybe Jimmy Olsen's going to show up, and Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet, and maybe some few other there'll be other references to the big red and blue Boy Scout, and maybe we'd see Clark rather than Superman. And at the beginning, that's the direction it seemed to be going in. Lois is deep undercover, and she's got she has a contact in Moscow who is revealing secrets, and there's going to be a story, and she's got to hit her deadlines, and Perry White's demanding, can you confirm this story? Yes, my sources are solid, blah blah blah. All those kind of hard-hitting reporter tropes that I was totally down for. But then it goes a bit supernatural, and then it relies on you knowing some back. I thought it was going to be completely standalone, but then it relies on you knowing some backstory that I didn't really know. I'm not up to date with what's happening in the Superman world. So there's references to Lois Lane's dad, who General Sam Lane, a relationship with her sister Lucy, who you may not know about. But Sam Lane, General Lane, has recently died, and I think you need to know a little bit about what happened there and what they're involved in. Say the occult comes into it, and that's why Superman can't get involved. Not because it's all about reporting, and this is not Superman's up in the air and she's down street level, but because Superman's powers can't interfere with magic. So when there's all sorts of, occult and satanic and magical heebie-jeebies going on, Superman's no use. So yeah, it was a bit disappointing that it went sort of supernatural and superhero-y in the end when I was really there for a totally human-based journalism story about Lois Lane. And Superman does show up occasionally. And there's even a plot line about how Lois Lane has been caught kissing Superman. Except everyone knows Lois Lane is married to Clark Kent. And everyone's up in arms. Is he cheating? Is she cheating? What does Clark Kent think? Why won't she answer the questions? And she's like being doorstopped by TMZ or whoever it is. And you know what? If you're going to go to the trouble of having that as a plot line, and you think no one is going to work out that Clark Kent and Superman have never been photographed together and never been in the same room, despite the fact that it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping. And there's a nice appearances by that is let me see. The woman with no face there is The Question. His character, who The Question these days is Renee Montoya, who used to be a detective in Gotham and is now taken on this superhero persona where she's not just any powers. It's a plastic faceless mask that she can wear. And she's a martial artist, a very highly trained martial artist. And she's acting as Lois Lane's bodyguard. Well, a lot of kerfuffle. It wasn't great. But better than fake accounts. Lois Lane, Enemy of the People by Greg Rucka, art by Mike Perkins. After that, I read Burnt Coat by Sarah Hall. So this is a novel by a British female writer. I haven't read Sarah Hall before. A book that I remember when it came out is one of her early novels called The Electric Michelangelo, which I think was shortlisted for something, maybe for the Booker or Women's Prize or something like that. That was a name that but I didn't read it. And then I see she's got a bunch of novels that have come out since then, and I have never read it before. But so this is my first Sarah Hall book, and it's a story about a woman who is an artist, and there's really fine stuff. It's very hard to write about dance, or write about painting, or write about being a musician. That's a lot. There are a lot of books on these subjects that actually exist in a medium other than the written word. It's much easier to write about being a writer. That makes sense. That translates. But writing about other media, I think, can be challenging. And I think this is a really fine bit of writing about what it means to be an artist and the drive to produce artwork and the effort involved, the practical effort, as well as the creative spirit that drives it. I think that part of the book is really interesting, and the woman at the center of this has lived with a mother who suffered some brain trauma, and so she lived with her mother. The father left, and she was her and her mother alone in the countryside for a long time. And there's a lot about that relationship. And then, but also in this, and she gets involved at a later stage in her life after she's found huge success. She's produced a massive work of art. I guess the glory would be the Angel of the North, the Anthony Gormley piece that's up in Newcombe North somewhere. So she's hugely successful and being paid lots of money for commissions. So she's now able to live comfortably, and she has this giant warehouse that she builds called Burnt Coat. That's the name of the home that she has, where she lives and creates her massive works of art. And she gets involved and forms a relationship, start of a relationship with a man who's a chef in a restaurant in town. And so there's a lot of early stages of love and attraction and lust, and it's really quite lovely. And then it turns into a pandemic novel. Then it's not, these things are interesting. It's not like this episode. But there's a massive, they're going to lockdown right at the start of this relationship. So that's like, okay, yeah, that's from a couple of years ago. We remember that happening and relationships being made or broken. Except the pandemic here is not the pandemic that we are all living through, or we have lived through all the lockdown. So instead of coronavirus, it's a norovirus. So instead of people dying of respiratory issues, people are vomiting and bleeding out of every orifice. I struggled with that as an authorial device to write a pandemic novel at a time of a pandemic and just go for one that was slightly more cinematic. Maybe it's a harsh criticism. I didn't understand you. We all recognize what was happening. We recognize lockdown. Do we really need all the shit and vomit? That Burnt Coat, it's great. It's a solid read, nice big print compared to fake accounts. But so it was an easier read, a more accessible read than that. I had a couple of issues with it, but I would recommend it because I think the writing is gorgeous. That is Burnt Coat by Sarah Hall. Then I read my second ever Maigret, and the first one was the first one I had was is a reprint, a recent reprint in the last 15, 20 years. This is a classic old Penguin copy, and this is this translation is Maigret meets a milord, as in a titled person, happens to be an English person. So even though obviously this book is originally written in French, this was translated by Robert Baldick, and this book was first published in 1931, and this translation was first published in 1963. I love this old battered thing which I picked up on eBay for like £4, and I would love to get more of these, even though the modern translations may be better. This was perfectly readable. Nothing wrong with this translation at all. And they're it's 120 pages, 130 pages tops. So you're in and out in easily in a sitting. In this story, there is a death by the canal, and Maigret spends a lot of the book cycling up and down because the boats on the canal move very slowly, so he can, even though the boat has passed through 12 locks, it's only 20 miles away, and so he gets there and interviews the people and then comes all the way back, and there's a lot of rain and canal weather, and just fabulous, really, really strong stuff. So I enjoyed this. This is the second Maigret that I've read, and there must be another 50 or 60. I use Wikipedia to work out what the names are because obviously they're written in French, they have French titles, but when they're translated into English, sometimes they change the title in English. So this is the second one, I believe. This is the second Maigret published. In this edition, it's called Maigret Meets a Milord. I think there are other English language editions where that title is different. So use Wikipedia for each one, and it's got an alternative title. So if you're a nerd like me, trying to read them in chronological order they were published, you need help in parsing which edition is which. But this is number 2 in my Maigret project. I don't have another one lined up, so and I'm kind of on a book buying ban for now, but I will order a couple more later this year and carry on with this, because they're in between reading a novel, whether it's wholly satisfying and gives you sort of a book hangover, or whether it's a bit frustrating, knowing that you can pick up something that's 130 pages, that's maximum 2 hours, probably an hour and 40. It's taking me to read 120 pages, something like this. I average roughly 60 pages an hour, but something bright and breezy like this with short chapters is you accelerate beyond that. This is just a great palate cleanser. So really looking forward to reading these probably for the next 20 years at least. I guess I read 2-3 a year. I'll need more than 20 years. Anyway, that's good. After that, another graphic novel. This was Ex Machina. This is the first 11 issues of Ex Machina, which was published by Vertigo, which was DC's adult imprint. I think it doesn't exist anymore. Vertigo started sort of the middle of the Hellblazer run, and I don't know, what was the first comic that was published wholly in Vertigo? Maybe a new Swamp Thing, or did Sandman start as Vertigo or only switch to Vertigo? I don't remember. But at some point in the late 80s, early 90s, DC created this Vertigo imprint, and they had some creator-owned content, but also it was mainly to differentiate the Vertigo line from Superman, Batman, Justice League kind of superhero fodder. Anyway, this was written by Brian K. Vaughan, drawn by Tony Harris, and it's actually got an intro. This edition has got an intro by Brad Meltzer, the thriller writer, novelist. I haven't read Brad Meltzer. I've read some of his comic work. I've never read his novels. And I like Brian K. Vaughan very much. I've read other stuff of his that I've really enjoyed, and so, but I'd never read this series. So the story is, we've got this guy here. His name is Mitchell 100. That's his actual name. And at some point, he comes into contact with an alien artifact and develops the ability to speak to and control all machines. And he adopts the superhero personality of the Great Machine and does some superheroing around New York, and it doesn't go very well, and he's not a terribly effective vigilante, and the police don't like the fact that he's a vigilante. And at some point, I can't remember the chronology, but at some point he saves the second tower from going down on 9/11. So in this reality, one of the towers was hit by a plane, and this superhero character, calling himself the Great Machine, managed to disrupt the second plane and stop it. So we've got one of the twin towers is still standing in this reality, and he retires as a superhero, and based on his heroism on 9/11, is elected mayor of New York, and that's where we start the story. So, okay, there are flashbacks to his time as a superhero, but mainly this is sort of West Wing-ish. There was a great movie, an Al Pacino movie called City Hall, Al Pacino and John Cusack, directed by, what's his name, Harold. God, I'm old and useless. Anyway, a great movie if you can find that somewhere. Late and sort of 90s movie. Anyway, Al Pacino, John Cusack, maybe Danny Aiello. I don't remember the rest of the cast, but really sort of good intrigue, City Hall intrigue movie. Predates West Wing, but it's that kind of political intrigue, and there's a lot of that going on here. Fast talking, sub-Sorkin dialogue, except with this element of aliens and former superhero stuff going on and weird shit happening. I didn't find it wholly convincing, if I'm honest. This is the first 11 issues. This was originally published in 2, and there are 50 issues. The comic was cancelled after 50 issues, or cancelled or completed its story. So the whole thing is 50 issues in and out. So I've got the first 11 here. He's a bit of a dick. I know I said this about Reed Richards the other day. I just didn't really like him. He's working out who he's supposed to be, and I guess that's part of the thing is how power corrupts, and politics is a shitty world to be in, and it's hard to be a good man in the world of politics. And this is local politics, so I guess it's slightly lower stakes than a presidency, for example. We've had, I'm sure there are stories about superheroes becoming president. This is becoming mayor of New York, but that's a pretty big job, and there's some pretty serious stuff going on, and it addresses some of the serious stuff, and funding the schools and after-school programs. And he's supposed to be an independent. He's supposed to not be a Republican or Democrat, and that's supposed to make him, not beholden to one or the other. But he doesn't have really good answers for things, and he doesn't behave very well. And then some of the superhero stuff or some of the alien stuff is really gruesome. Like, so the tonally, is it supposed to be sort of Sorkin-y, light bantery, or are bodies supposed to be ripped apart and entrails, people being taken over by alien personas and gutting their family? Weird. Anyway, so I'm not sure. I'll look for more of these, but that was the first 11 issues. This was when it was a trade paperback, when it was just the first 6 issues. I think the first storyline is called the first 100 days. He's Mitchell 100, and the first 100 days is a metric that is often used after an election. That was the part. Anyway, that's the first one. Not great. Okay, witty, rude, foul-mouthed, but not great. Then I read something which is also rude and foul-mouthed and violent, and this was a book called Sweepy by C.J. Skews. I love the fact they came in this brilliant library cover. So this was actually withdrawn from Essex County Council. I can't remember where I would have heard about this. This is the kind of book I don't often use. This is a UK-based thriller, actually fairly derivative. So Sweepy of the title. So you can read, the last person who called me Sweepy ended up dead. That's the cover. So Sweepy, the protagonist here is a young woman called Rhiannon, R-H-I, named after the Fleetwood Mac song, or something. She is a serial killer, and there's some horrible backstory that she was kidnapped and held and abused when she was very young, and then she was released, and then her parents got rich at a radio show. And we hear in the thing that she was on Ellen, but she was sort of mute and paraplegic for a while after she escaped her. Anyway, as a result, she's become a serial killer. But she's got this normal life that she has to maintain. So her parents have now died, but her father sort of kind of knew what she was and kept her safe. Her sister just thinks she's a nutter, so she's gone off to America, and her mother's died as well. And she works at a local newspaper. So there's lots of different elements that we've seen before. So a lot of Dexter. I've never read the Jeff Lindsay books, but I watched the first few seasons of Dexter, which is about a serial killer who lives by a code and only kills bad people, and has to keep his obsession hidden, even though it's what drives him, and he hungers him, and he hasn't killed someone, he's itching to go and kill someone. All that's in here as well. But there's also the I think it's described on the back somewhere, someone blurbed it as Bridget Jones meets American Psycho, and that's kind of spot on, because we start every chapter with a list of the people she wants to kill, sort of, like Bridget Jones finished every chapter with, or it began every chapter with how many cigarettes she smoked and what she'd eaten and how much she weighs that day or whatever the thing is. I love Bridget Jones. When the book first came out, we were big Bridget Jones fans, and I love American Psycho as well, sort of unashamedly and unironically. I thought it was a great book that's been misunderstood. So there's that. So we got the Bridget Jones parts of who she wants to kill, and the people she wants to kill are the guy at the checkout counter in Lidl who squeezed her loaf. That kind of, so it's that kind of funny, petty, silly. She doesn't actually kill him, but she ends up, not through much design, but she ends up mostly only killing perverts and rapists. I'm not sure she set out that way, but she's kind of okay with the fact that the people she kills are bad people, and some of them she tracks, and some of them are accidental. Some guy who grabs her on a drunken. At the end of a drunken night at a pub, and grabs her and sexually assaults her, and she severs a key part of his body which he was trying to get serviced, and kills him. And there's and then trying to track down who the killer is. And meanwhile, she's working in the local newspaper, and she's going on hen weekends with her besties. And it's very weird tonally, but actually it was kind of repulsive. I read this whole thing in 2 days. Like it's a lot of it, and there's 2 sequences, 400 and nearly 500 pages. And I zoomed through it because it was kind of fun, even though it's a bit bonkers, and as I say, tonally all over the place. And sort of, I don't really like the British version of these things. I prefer them when they're sort of American. I find this sort of small town mentality, and this is very much set in a small town. And the problems of a small town, where everywhere she goes, she knows the people. I don't know how there are so many molesters and evil sexual perverts in such a small town, but she seems to find them all and kill them, and they still can't work out. So anyway, kind of fun. I'm not that desperate to read the sequels because I kind of got everything I need out of this character. As I say, it dips into so many other tropes and similar things, but not terrible. In fact, if you're ever going to write a book, you'd want it to be as propulsive as this. Not quite as repulsive as, yes, some of the murder is like really nasty, but that's it. God, I spoke much long. Yeah, so what I'm reading now, so I finished Sweepy, and then I just started Lucia Berlin's A Manual for Cleaning Women, which is a collection of her best stories. So this was published posthumously, I think 10 years after she died, and then won loads of prizes. 25th, she died in 2004. I don't know anything about Lucia Berlin except what I'm telling you. This has got a foreword by Lydia Davis. I've got a collection of her short stories as well, which I haven't read, never read Lydia Davis. I haven't read short stories for a while. I love short stories. I bought these collections of short stories, and now I'm going to read them. A Manual for Cleaning Women by Lucia Berlin. God help you if you stay this long. If you're still here, make sure you add the word preposterous to your comment. God bless. Take care. Bye.